The champagne flute shattered against marble, its crystalline fragments scattering like diamonds across the restaurant floor. Marcus Chen didn't flinch. He'd cleaned up worse messes during his 3 years at Le Bernardine's upscale counterpart, where Manhattan's elite gathered to see and be seen. But this wasn't broken glass from a clumsy toast. This was the prelude to something far more dangerous. Empty the register. Now. The voice came from a man whose ski mask couldn't hide the desperation in his eyes. 3 others flanked him, blocking the exits, their hands buried in jacket pockets in a universal gesture that needed no translation. Marcus's daughter Emma flashed through his mind, her gap-toothed smile that morning, the parent-teacher conference note crumpled in his locker downstairs, the electric bill he'd promised himself he'd pay this week. His hands trembled as he reached for the nearest table to steady himself, not from fear, but from the weight of a past he'd spent 5 years trying to forget. The restaurant had been full minutes ago. Now it was a frozen tableau of terror. Elderly couples clutched each other. A young woman fumbled with her phone until one of the intruders snatched it away. And there, in the corner booth beneath the Chagall reproduction, sat William Hartley, tech billionaire, philanthropist, and according to the Forbes magazine Marcus had flipped through during his lunch break, the 7th richest person in America. Hartley wasn't cowering. He sat unnaturally still, his face pale, one hand pressed against his chest. Marcus had seen that look before, in a different life, in a different uniform. The man wasn't just scared. He was dying. The safe, the leader barked at the manager, whose hands shook so violently he couldn't work his own key. 30 seconds or someone gets hurt. Marcus moved without thinking, muscle memory overriding the careful civilian persona he'd constructed. He stepped forward, his voice calm, steady, the same tone he'd used to talk down a suicide bomber in Kandahar 7 years ago. Hey, let's everyone take a breath. Nobody needs to get hurt here. The leader spun toward him, finally pulling his hand from his pocket. No gun, just bravado and brass knuckles. Sit down, waiter. This doesn't concern you. That man in the corner is having a heart attack, Marcus said, gesturing toward Hartley, whose lips had taken on a bluish tint. Let me help him, then you can have whatever you want. You're not murderers. Don't become them tonight. For a moment, time suspended itself. The leader's eyes darted between Marcus, Hartley, and his crew. Marcus could see the calculation happening, the recognition that a dead billionaire would bring heat none of them could handle. 2 minutes, the leader finally snapped. Then we're gone, with or without the money. Marcus was already moving. He reached Hartley just as the billionaire slumped forward. Combat medic training kicked in, 14 months of it compressed into seconds of action. He lowered Hartley to the floor, loosened his tie, checked his airway. The pulse was thready, irregular. Does anyone have aspirin? Marcus called out. A woman near the bar shakily held up her purse. Bring it here. And you, he pointed at a young man frozen by the kitchen doors, call 911. Tell them possible MI, male, 60s, needs immediate transport. His hands worked with practiced precision, administering the aspirin, positioning Hartley's head, monitoring his breathing. Around him, the chaos continued. The manager had finally opened the safe. The intruders were stuffing cash into garbage bags, but Marcus existed in a bubble of focus he hadn't inhabited since his discharge. Stay with me, he murmured to Hartley, whose eyes flickered with consciousness. You've got too much money to die in an Italian restaurant. Think of the irony. A ghost of a smile crossed Hartley's lips. Then everything went sideways. One of the intruders, younger and more volatile than the others, grabbed a diner's necklace with enough force to throw her off balance. She screamed, her husband lunged, and suddenly the youngest robber had a very real gun pointed at the couple. Easy, Marcus said, his voice carrying across the room with undeniable authority. He didn't stand, couldn't leave Hartley, but something in his tone made everyone freeze. Look at me. The young man's hand shook. Marcus recognized that shake, had seen it in 19-year-old privates who'd never expected to fire their weapons outside a range. You're scared. I get it. But that woman you just grabbed. Someone's mother. Maybe someone's grandmother. You really want to hurt her. For what? A necklace worth maybe $2,000. Marcus kept his voice level, non-threatening. Your crew already has the cash. Don't throw your life away over pearls. Shut up. You don't know anything about me. I know you're young. I know you're making choices tonight you'll regret for the rest of your life. Marcus maintained eye contact, the same technique he'd used in hostage negotiations. I also know that right now, you can still walk away from this without hurting anyone. That's worth more than anything in this restaurant. The leader stepped forward, putting his hand on the young man's shoulder. He's right. We got what we came for. Let's go. For 5 agonizing seconds, nobody breathed. Then the young man lowered the gun, and the 4 intruders bolted for the exit just as sirens wailed in the distance. The paramedics arrived 4 minutes later. They stabilized Hartley, loaded him onto a stretcher, and Marcus finally allowed himself to collapse into a chair, his hands still steady despite the adrenaline crash beginning to set in. That was the bravest thing I've ever seen. The manager stood over him, tears streaming down his face. You saved his life. Maybe all of our lives. Marcus shook his head. Just did what anyone would do. No, said a woman holding her phone up, its red recording light still active. That's not what anyone would do. That's what a hero does. The video went viral by morning. Marcus woke to 847 missed calls, his phone battery dead, Emma jumping on his bed asking why Daddy was on TV. The footage showed everything: his calm competence with Hartley, his negotiation with the gunman, the steadiness of his hands while everyone else panicked. 3 days later, Marcus stood in a hospital room where William Hartley sat propped against pillows, looking pale but alive. The doctors say you gave me an extra 15 minutes I wouldn't have had, Hartley said. 15 minutes that saved my life. Just glad I remembered my training, sir. I looked into you. Purple Heart recipient. Combat medic. Honorable discharge after taking shrapnel saving your unit. Hartley's eyes were sharp despite his ordeal. Why are you waiting tables? Marcus shrugged. PTSD made corporate work difficult. Waiting tables has flexible hours for single dad life. Emma needs me present more than she needs me impressive. Hartley was quiet for a moment. I started a foundation 15 years ago for veterans transitioning to civilian life. We've helped thousands, but clearly not enough. I'd like you to run it. Sir, don't answer now. But Marcus, here's what I learned dying on that restaurant floor: the most valuable thing in the world isn't money. It's having someone who gives a damn show up when you need them. Hartley's voice cracked slightly. You showed up for a stranger. Let me show up for you. 6 months later, Marcus walked through the Foundation's new offices, Emma's hand in his. On the wall hung a photograph from that night, not of the robbery, but of Marcus kneeling beside Hartley, his face a mask of concentration and care. The plaque beneath it read, "Heroes aren't born. They're ordinary people who choose to act when others freeze." Marcus squeezed Emma's hand, thinking of the electric bill that was paid now, the therapy sessions he could finally afford, the other veterans he was helping find their footing. One night, one choice, had changed everything. "Daddy," Emma said, looking up at him with those wise 7-year-old eyes, "you're famous." He knelt down to her level, seeing his reflection in her pupils, not the warrior he'd been or the struggling waiter he'd become, but simply a man who'd refused to look away when someone needed help. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "I'm just someone who remembered that we're all in this together. That's not fame. That's just being human." Outside, the city hummed with 8 million stories. And in one foundation office, a single dad who'd once served his country now served his fellow veterans, proving that sometimes the greatest battles aren't fought with weapons, but with the simple, radical act of showing up when someone needs you most.